What if I told you that everything you're stressing about is already handled? What if the breakthrough you're begging for isn't on the way? It's already waiting on you to believe it. You're not fighting for victory. You're walking into something that was finished before you even started. So the question isn't when will it happen? The real question is, can you stop overthinking long enough to trust that God has already done it? Overthinking is a sign of misplaced trust. It's not just a mental habit. It's a spiritual indicator that your confidence has been redirected from the eternal to the temporary. When you find yourself awake at 2 a.m., tossing and turning, replaying conversations, calculating outcomes, imagining worst-case scenarios, it's not because you're strategic. It's because you've allowed your trust to shift from the one who controls the outcome to yourself, who barely controls the next breath. You've become the manager of what God never asked you to supervise. You see, overthinking often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself, I'm just being cautious, or I need to plan ahead. But the truth is, deep down, you don't trust that it's already being taken care of. So you feel the need to fix it before God finishes it. That's why you're drained. That's why your peace is broken. That's why even after praying, you still pace the floor. Because your heart says, I trust God. But your mind is still running simulations on what could go wrong. Let me tell you something. Trust is not saying, I believe. Trust is resting. Trust is sleeping in the storm like Jesus did while the boat rocked and the thunder cracked. Why? Because he knew who he was with. Some of us say we trust, but we build mental spreadsheets for every potential disaster. That's not trust. That's fear wearing a business suit. Imagine a child riding in the back seat of a car, asking the parent every 5 minutes, are we there yet? Are we going the right way? Did you check the GPS? At some point, the parent might look back and say, relax, I know where we're going. Now imagine the child still not convinced and grabbing the steering wheel from the back seat. That's overthinking. You're trying to take the wheel from the one who knows every mile, every detour, every delay, and every destination. We're like that child sometimes, trying to navigate life when we were never called to drive it. You're trying to micromanage divine timing. You're losing hair, losing sleep, and losing joy because you've convinced yourself that if you don't solve it, it won't be solved. But here's the truth, what you keep rehearsing in your mind, God already resolved in his plan. Think about the story of the Israelites standing before the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army behind them, water in front of them, no visible escape. They began to panic, overthink, complain, cry. But what did God say through Moses? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. In other words, stop calculating, stop figuring, stop moving, just watch, just trust, just rest. Overthinking wouldn't have parted that sea. Only obedience did. Some of you are facing a Red Sea in your life right now. Bills piling up, health report that scares you, relationship on the edge, and you're trying to think your way out of it. But God is saying, stop trying to outthink my wisdom. Just walk in my instruction. What looks like a wall is often just the door God hasn't opened yet. Overthinking wastes energy on what hasn't even happened. You've created full-length horror films in your mind that will never become reality. You've played conversations in your head that will never be spoken. You've already lived through pain that may never come. That's emotional theft. That's spiritual exhaustion. And that's the price of misplaced trust. God never asked you to understand the how. He just said to believe in the who. We trust GPS systems more than we trust God. Think about it. You'll follow your navigation through cities you've never been to, take turns into roads you've never seen, pass through alleys in the dark, and never question it once. Why? Because the GPS said so. Yet when God says, go, we need confirmation, a sign, 3 prophecies, a journal entry, and a friend to agree. That's misplaced trust. That's believing in algorithms over an almighty. Every time you overthink, you're telling God, I'm not sure you've got this. Let me run a backup plan. And heaven is silent not because God is absent, but because he's already finished what you're still worrying about. He's not repeating himself just to calm your anxiety. His silence is a sign that the plan is sealed. It's not a negotiation. It's an announcement waiting on your surrender. You're in a war you don't have to fight, a weight you weren't meant to carry, a future you're trying to unlock with human keys. And the Master is saying, trust me. The doors you think are locked haven't been opened because your hands are too full of assumptions, conclusions, and questions. But trust requires open hands, not clenched fists. You can't receive peace while gripping control. Your trust must be rooted in truth, not in circumstances. Circumstances change. Emotions fluctuate. People disappoint. But truth stands. And the truth is, He's already in tomorrow. He's already aligned the answers before you even form the questions. He's not panicked, so you don't have to be. You're overthinking something that God already settled in eternity. You're battling something that's already been won. You're climbing a mountain that He already leveled. Overthinking makes you forget who you are. You were born to walk by faith, not sit in fear. You were created to move with peace, not drown in pressure. You were designed to rest in the shadow of the Almighty, not run around trying to control shadows. The enemy knows that if he can get your mind, he can paralyze your progress. But when you realize that overthinking is not protection, it's poison, everything shifts. So next time you feel that spiral of what ifs and mental chaos beginning, pause, breathe, speak to your soul, remind yourself, if it's in His hands, it's in control. And if it's in control, I don't need to overthink. I need to trust. Because the God who designed the stars doesn't need your mental blueprint to fix your life. Divine purpose always comes with divine provision. When God assigns you to do something, He doesn't wait for you to figure it all out before He supplies the resources. He already factored in everything you would need before you ever took your first step. The problem is, we often look for the provision before we walk in the purpose. But provision is never sent to those who wait for it with fear. It is revealed to those who move with faith. The reason many people feel stuck isn't because God hasn't provided. It's because they haven't obeyed. Think about it. When you're given a job offer, the salary package comes attached. You don't have to beg the company to pay you every month. They already calculated your value and committed the resources before you showed up on your first day. So why do we treat God like He sends us out empty-handed, like we have to scrape, beg, and chase after what we need? If a human corporation can commit to pay you before you produce a single result, how much more will your Creator supply for what He called you to do? Your purpose carries a promise. You were not sent here to struggle blindly, hoping to survive. You were sent with a blueprint, a seed of destiny, and a heaven-backed guarantee that if you align with His will, every step will be ordered, every door will be timed, and every need will be met. The issue isn't whether God will provide. The issue is whether you trust Him enough to move when it doesn't look like enough. Some of you are waiting to see money before you start the vision, waiting to feel ready before you step into leadership, waiting for connections before you launch that business. But purpose doesn't start when you're ready. Purpose starts when you're obedient. And the provision doesn't show up for the hesitant. It shows up for the bold, the ones who say, I don't have it all, but I trust the one who does. God's provision follows movement. Think of the widow in the story of Elijah. All she had left was a little oil and a little flour, enough for one final meal. But when she followed the instruction of the prophet and gave the last of what she had, provision began to multiply. It didn't multiply in her hands when she measured it. It multiplied as she poured it. The miracle was not in the quantity, it was in the obedience. That's how it works. You will never see the full table until you sit down with faith. You want a full bank account before you obey. But God is asking, can you trust me with the empty jar? You want applause before you speak, but He says, can you declare it in silence? You want the blueprint before you start building, but God whispers, can you trust the voice, not the visibility? Provision is not just money. Provision is people. Provision is time. Provision is mental strength. Provision is supernatural favor. Provision is the strategy you couldn't learn in a book. Provision is the moment a stranger opens a door you didn't even knock on. Provision is divine acceleration that puts you years ahead in weeks. But here's the key. Provision is unlocked by pursuit. Every time you doubt God's provision, you insult His character. You're saying, I don't believe you'll back me up. And heaven stands silent, not because God isn't listening, but because He already answered when He gave you the assignment. God doesn't fund fear. He funds faith. He doesn't partner with hesitation. He partners with belief. Think of a GPS. You don't get the next turn until you move forward. You don't see the full map while standing still. Some of you are demanding to see the entire journey from where you are. But God is saying, I'm not giving you the full map. I'm giving you my hand. The provision is not in knowing every detail. The provision is in knowing the one who holds all the details. People often say, If God really called me, why am I struggling? The answer is, many times, the struggle is not a sign of lack. It's a sign of development. You're in training. You're being positioned. You're learning how to carry the weight of the purpose you've been given. And even in the struggle, you're being sustained. Look back. Did you starve? No. Were you abandoned? No. Did the lights go out? Maybe. But you're still here. That's provision. You may not have had overflow, but you've never been forsaken. There is always provision in the process. Sometimes it's not what you expected. Sometimes it's disguised as a challenge. Sometimes it comes through people you didn't even like. But when you're walking in divine purpose, nothing is wasted. Even your pain becomes provision because it builds endurance. Even your disappointment becomes provision because it builds discernment. Even your delay becomes provision because it builds patience. Let me tell you this, your purpose is not fragile. Your destiny is not on life support. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are not forgotten. What God has prepared for you will not be missed as long as you keep moving forward. There's a difference between waiting on God and waiting with fear. One honors His timing. The other questions His faithfulness. You may not see the whole staircase, but take the first step, because what you call not enough is often more than enough when it's placed in the hands of the divine. The 5 loaves and 2 fish didn't feed the crowd when they were held tightly. They fed the crowd when they were surrendered. You want God to multiply what you won't release. But multiplication doesn't happen in control. It happens in surrender. Faith is not logical. It's foundational. Logic is based on what you can see, touch, measure, or prove. Faith is built on what you know to be true, even when you have no evidence in front of you. Logic says, I'll believe it when I see it. Faith declares, I believe it even if I never see it, because the one who promised it cannot lie. Logic looks for patterns. Faith looks for purpose. Logic waits for confirmation. Faith moves on conviction. You were never designed to live life based solely on logic. You were created to be rooted in a deeper reality, one that does not bend with facts or fluctuate with feelings. Every major breakthrough in your life will require you to bypass logic. It will not make sense to others. It will not add up on paper. It will not align with trends or statistics. It may even go against everything you've been taught. But faith doesn't consult the facts before it makes a move. Faith only asks one question, did God say it? Imagine if Noah had relied on logic. Rain had never fallen from the sky, and yet he was building a massive ark in the middle of dry land. Imagine the mockery, the confusion, the questions. Why waste all these resources? Why build for a storm you can't see? Logic would have told him to wait until clouds formed. Faith told him to build before there was a drop. And that obedience saved generations. You don't need faith for what you can explain. You need faith for what breaks the rules, for what stretches you beyond your comfort, for what calls you out into the deep where your degrees can't help you, where your contacts don't call back, where your resume doesn't qualify you. That's where faith starts, where logic ends. In our culture, we're trained to depend on data. We want charts, graphs, forecasts, projections. We want to make sure every is dotted and every T is crossed. But there are moments when all of that collapses, when your plan doesn't work, when your research fails, when your strategy still leaves you empty. That's when you must decide, will I lean on what I know or who I know? Some of the most life-changing decisions you will make won't be logical. Starting a business with no investors, marrying someone who doesn't check every box on your list, but brings peace to your soul, walking away from a high-paying job to follow a passion you can't fully explain. Logic will scream, are you sure? But faith will whisper, I've already seen the finish line. Logic stands at the edge. Faith jumps and grows wings on the way down. Let's be honest, logic has its place. It's a tool, but it can't be your foundation, because logic is based on limited vision. You only know what you've seen. But faith pulls from a dimension where time doesn't exist and possibilities are unlimited. Faith lets you borrow strength from the future to fight battles in the present. It gives you peace when you should be panicking. It gives you hope when others have walked away. It allows you to stand still while others are running in fear, because faith knows what logic forgot God is still in control. Think about Peter walking on water. Logic would have told him to stay in the boat. The boat was safe. The boat was floating. The boat was built to handle storms. But Jesus wasn't in the boat. He was in the waves. And Peter had to make a decision. Stay in what makes sense or step into what's supernatural. He chose faith. And for a moment, gravity lost its power. Science paused. Nature made room for the divine. Why? Because faith overrides the natural when your eyes are locked on the supernatural. But let's not forget, when Peter started to sink, it wasn't because he lost ability. It was because he started thinking logically. He noticed the wind. He saw the waves. His brain kicked in and faith took a step back. That's what happens to us. You start walking in faith, but the moment you analyze too much, you paralyze yourself. You hesitate, you stall, you doubt. And what was once a divine movement becomes a mental mess. There's a story behind every miracle. But if you look closely, you'll find that logic was not part of the equation. The walls of Jericho fell not because of a military strategy, but because people shouted. Blind men received sight because they believed before they could see. Water turned to wine not through process, but through obedience. None of it was logical. All of it was foundational. Faith is the oxygen of purpose. Without it, you suffocate under the weight of fear, doubt, and delay. It doesn't mean you don't feel uncertain. It means you move even when you do. It doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you believe a greater reality is at work. You can't build a destiny on logic alone. Logic is a light switch. Faith is the wiring. The switch can flicker, but if the wiring is strong, the power still flows. When you live by faith, you confuse people. You'll have peace and they'll call you naive. You'll take risks and they'll say you're reckless. You'll succeed where others failed and they'll call it luck. But it's not luck, it's alignment. It's a life rooted in truth that does not change with headlines, bank statements, or opinions. It's waking up every day and saying, I may not see the full picture, but I trust the one holding the brush. Your mind is a battlefield, but peace is a weapon, not a weakness, not a luxury, a weapon. In a world that glorifies business and praises overthinking as preparation, choosing peace is the most defiant and powerful thing you can do. You see, the greatest wars are not fought with guns or tanks. They're fought in the unseen chambers of the human mind. That's where fear is planted. That's where insecurity grows. That's where anxiety whispers, you're not enough. And where self-doubt repeats, what if it all goes wrong? If the enemy can capture your thoughts, he can imprison your future without ever laying a hand on your body. The mind is where victories are either birthed or aborted. Every insecurity you've wrestled with, every sleepless night you've endured, every opportunity you've second-guessed, those weren't external attacks. That was the battlefield in your mind trying to make you surrender before you even started. And the tragedy is, many people lose the war not because they weren't strong enough to fight, but because they never understood that peace was their weapon. Peace doesn't mean nothing's happening around you. Peace means chaos is around you, but it no longer lives inside of you. Peace is when the storm is raging, but your soul is still. Peace is when the world is spinning, but your heart is anchored. Peace is not passive. Peace is power under control. Peace doesn't avoid the storm. It walks into it and says, you will not shake me. Imagine this, you're driving down a highway during heavy rain. The wind is blowing, visibility is low, and every other car has pulled off to the side, waiting for the storm to pass. But something inside you says, keep driving. So you press forward slowly, carefully, eyes on the road. Minutes later, the rain begins to lighten. The sky starts to clear. And then you realize you didn't wait for the storm to pass. You passed through the storm. That's what peace does. It keeps you moving when others freeze. It gives you traction when fear tries to make you spin out. You need to understand that peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of purpose. Peace is what keeps your mind from self-sabotaging what God has already secured. Peace says, I know the facts, but I'm anchored in the truth. The fact may be that the bank account is low, but the truth says, my provider never sleeps. The fact may be that the report is bad, but the truth says, healing is still possible. The fact may be that people left, but the truth says, I'm never abandoned. Peace connects you to the truth while facts scream for your attention. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your life if he can just disturb your mind. If he can keep you up at night with fear, keep you doubting your value, keep you rehearsing conversations that never happened. He doesn't need to take your dream because he already stole your focus. But when you use peace as a weapon, your mind becomes fortified. Your thoughts come into order. You stop reacting to every emotional wave and start standing on immovable ground. Peace protects your energy. Peace sharpens your discernment. Peace filters out distractions that look like opportunities, but are really traps. You can always tell who has peace by how they move. People with peace don't panic. They don't explain themselves to everyone. They don't beg for attention. They move with quiet power because they know that being still doesn't mean being stuck. It means being focused. There's a reason the instruction was be still and know, not run around and figure it out, not worry and plan. Just be still. Stillness is a weapon because it gives your spirit room to hear. You can't hear clearly in the noise of your overthinking. You can't receive direction when your thoughts are racing with fear. Silence is not empty. It's full of strategy. And peace is the doorway to that silence. Have you ever tried to untangle a knot with shaking hands? It's almost impossible. But the moment you calm down, breathe and focus, your fingers find the rhythm and the knot begins to loosen. That's your mind. That's your life. When you're in panic, everything tightens. When you operate in peace, things begin to unfold. Sometimes the greatest move you can make is to pause and protect your peace, to cancel the meeting, to shut off the notifications, to stop explaining your vision to people who were never supposed to understand it. Peace is selective. It guards the gate of your mind and decides what comes in and what must leave. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every opinion requires your response. Peace teaches you that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. People think peace is boring, but real peace is powerful. It gives you clarity when confusion wants to run your life. It gives you confidence when you've got no applause. It gives you vision when everything around you looks dark. Peace is a weapon because it cuts through the noise. It clears the fog. It silences the voice of doubt and amplifies the voice of purpose. And when people see that you're not shaken by what should have broken you, they'll ask, "How are you so calm?" That's when you tell them, "I've been in the battlefield long enough to know that panic doesn't win wars. Peace does." You can't hear God clearly in a clouded mind. When your thoughts are cluttered with fear, worry, regret, and overanalysis, the voice of God becomes harder to detect. Not because He's not speaking, but because your mental atmosphere is too noisy to receive Him. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in a room full of shouting. That's what it feels like when your soul is overstimulated. God is not loud. He doesn't compete with your chaos. He waits for your attention, not your anxiety. We live in a generation that's constantly on. Notifications, alerts, updates, to-do lists. Your brain is trained to be busy, trained to overthink, trained to analyze every outcome before it even happens. But heaven doesn't shout through your phone. It whispers in your stillness. It flows through your silence. And when your mind is clouded, you begin to confuse your inner fears with divine direction. You start labeling your survival instincts as God's will. But survival isn't clarity. Activity isn't progress. Noise isn't instruction. The only way to truly hear is to quiet the storm inside. Let's be real, some people are not hearing from God because they never give Him space to speak. They pray, but their prayers are rushed. They ask for guidance, but they don't wait for the answer. They read the Word, but their mind is multitasking. They want revelation, but they're addicted to distraction. You scroll through social media for 3 hours, but can't sit in silence for 10 minutes. And yet you ask, why don't I hear God? The truth is, He's not absent. He's being drowned out by the volume of your life. When the mind is clouded, everything looks urgent. You start panicking about things that haven't even happened. You rehearse conversations in your head, trying to fix imaginary problems. You start leaning on human logic instead of divine instruction. You lose your discernment. You confuse a good opportunity with a God opportunity. You start calling detours, signs, and delays judgment. Why? Because clarity can't grow in confusion. And your mind becomes a breeding ground for misinterpretation when it's not managed with intentional silence. Picture someone trying to tune a radio to the right frequency. If there's static, you don't throw the radio away. You adjust the dial, you find the signal. That's how your spirit works. If things feel off, if the direction feels unclear, it may not mean God isn't speaking. It may just mean you need to adjust your frequency, tune out the static, cut off the noise. Step away from the constant mental traffic, because your destiny doesn't need a louder voice. It needs a clearer signal. Some of the most dangerous decisions you'll ever make are made in a foggy mental state. Decisions made while stressed, angry, tired, insecure, or distracted. That's why people walk away from jobs they were called to. Marriages break up over assumptions instead of conversations. Dreams are aborted because discouragement screamed louder than direction. When the mind is clouded, The enemy doesn't need to attack you. He just lets your own thoughts turn against you. There's a reason why Jesus often withdrew to quiet places. He understood the power of clarity. He didn't just perform miracles. He prioritized solitude. He stepped away not because he was weak, but because he was wise. He knew that clarity requires space, stillness, a decluttered mind. And yet, we try to do the opposite. We run harder when life gets noisy. We work more, hustle more, call more people, ask for more advice. But what you need is not always more input. Sometimes it's more intimacy. Think about how fog affects your vision when you're driving. You may have the best car, the strongest engine, full fuel. But if you can't see clearly, you can't move safely. That's how some of us live spiritually. Equipped, gifted, passionate, but unable to move with confidence because the fog in your mind has stolen your vision. And what good is a calling if you can't see where you're going? Have you ever tried to make a decision while you're mentally exhausted? It's almost impossible. You second guess everything. You call friends just to get confirmation. You replay worst-case scenarios like they're Netflix shows. You analyze a text message like it's a legal contract. That's not discernment. That's a cluttered soul crying out for rest. Your mind was never designed to carry the weight of the world. You were never meant to figure out everything on your own. That's why divine guidance exists. But divine guidance doesn't shout over drama. It speaks in peace. Sometimes the answer isn't try harder. Sometimes it's sit quieter. The most strategic thing you can do for your future is not adding more plans. It's subtracting more noise. Cut the background conversations. Shut off the what if questions. Silence the fear of failing, because the more you quiet the world around you, the more you'll start to hear the world within you. And if the Spirit of God lives in you, that internal world is where divine clarity begins. Your next level requires a clearer mind, not just a busier schedule. You think it's about being more productive, but it's really about being more present. God doesn't need to fight for your attention. He needs your surrender. The moment you prioritize peace, you position yourself to hear. The moment you stop chasing every thought, you start recognizing which ones are divine. Because when the mind is uncluttered, the voice of God no longer feels like a mystery. It feels like home. God finishes before He starts. This means that before you ever showed up in that problem, the solution was already sealed. Before you were born, the assignment was written. Before you cried out in confusion, the answer was already echoing through eternity. You are not trying to make life happen. You are discovering what's already done. You're not building from scratch. You're walking into something that has already been completed in the realm of purpose. When God begins a thing, He starts from the end and then backs up to your beginning. That's why some doors close without warning, because they weren't on the map. That's why some relationships break, even though they felt good, because they don't fit the picture that's already been painted. God is not editing your story as you go. He is unfolding it, revealing it. He's the author, not the co-writer. He doesn't need your help, just your alignment. Take a puzzle box as an example. When you open a puzzle, you see 1,000 random pieces, strange shapes, confusing fragments. It doesn't look like anything useful, but there's a picture on the box. That picture is the finished product. And every piece, no matter how awkward or out of place it looks at the moment, is necessary to complete the full design. Your life is the same way. It may feel disjointed, uncertain, confusing, but there's a divine picture already printed in heaven. And every heartbreak, every delay, every closed door is a piece of the masterpiece. That's why faith is not guessing. Faith is trusting that you're not building something new. You're unveiling something eternal. You're not inventing your destiny. You're walking in what's already been prepared. That's why peace comes when you stop striving to figure it all out and start surrendering to the fact that God already did. Your steps are ordered, not improvised. Your purpose is fixed, not accidental. Nothing you're going through is surprising to heaven. You're not catching God off guard with your prayers. He's not scrambling to solve your situation. He's not pacing the floors of heaven wondering how to fix your life. He already handled it before you even felt it. Think of construction workers building a skyscraper. Do they start pouring concrete before there's a blueprint? Never. The blueprint always comes first. Before a single nail is driven, the architect has already imagined every inch of the structure, every room, every floor, every light fixture. The workers on the ground may not see the full plan. They only work on their section. But they trust that what they're building is part of a bigger design. Your life is under divine construction, and God holds the blueprint. So when you feel like things don't make sense, it's not because the plan is broken. It's because you're working on a part that hasn't revealed its purpose yet. Some of you are praying for things that are already done. You just haven't arrived at the manifestation point yet. You're asking God to do it, and He's saying, I already did, now walk. It's like ordering something online. Once you pay, it's yours, even if it hasn't arrived yet. You don't call the store every hour asking if you still own it. You just wait for the delivery. That's how heaven works. The moment God declared your purpose, it was paid in full. You just have to keep walking until the package hits your doorstep. You don't need to panic during the shipping process. When God finishes something, it means there is nothing missing from it. Even what you think you lost was already accounted for. That heartbreak, that delay, that betrayal, that disappointment, all of it fits into the final masterpiece. Even your mistakes. God doesn't build around your failure. He builds through it. He doesn't discard your pain. He weaves it into power. What looks like a setback is often the seam between one chapter and the next. And when God finishes something, it means even your weakest moments can't undo His perfect plan. That's why you've got to stop walking like you're uncertain. You weren't created to figure life out as you go. You were designed to discover what's already written. That's why the enemy fights your confidence. Because if you ever understood that God finishes before He starts, you'd stop doubting yourself. You'd stop questioning your assignment. You'd stop giving up at the first sign of resistance. If it's already finished, then your only job is to move like it's true. Think like it's done. Speak like it's handled. Show up like it's yours. Because it is. When you understand that God starts from the finish line, you stop panicking at the starting blocks. You realize that time doesn't intimidate Him. Delays don't derail Him. Detours don't confuse Him. He sees your life from a dimension that you can't comprehend. You're stressing over the chapter you're in while He's already seen the final scene. He's not nervous. He's not unsure. He's not trying to make it work. He finished the work before He ever breathed you into existence. And if He finished it, that means there's no need to manipulate, no need to chase people who walked away, no need to beg for opportunities, no need to prove your worth. It means you can move with boldness, walk with peace, and speak with authority. Not because you have all the answers, but because the outcome has already been sealed in eternity. It was finished before it began. You're not late. You're not behind. You're right on schedule in a plan that was completed before you ever took your first breath. And now, after all is said and spoken, I want you to understand this truth deep in your bones. You are not walking into your future guessing. You are stepping into a destiny that's already finished. You are not praying to a God trying to figure it out with you. You're trusting a God who has already resolved it before you even knew it was a problem. The battle you're stressing over, it's already been won. The door you're crying over, if it didn't open, it was never meant to carry your greatness. What God started, He finished. Not halfway, not almost, but completely. The question is not, will He come through? The question is, will you trust Him while He unfolds what He's already completed? Stop pacing the floor like a prisoner when you've been called to walk like royalty. Stop letting your emotions talk you out of what your spirit already knows. You may not see the full picture yet, but never mistake silence for absence. God is not late. He's just strategic. He moves by patterns, not panic. While you're worrying about the timing, heaven is organizing the outcome. You are not chasing blessings. They're chasing you. But blessings don't land where fear lives. They rest where faith reigns. The world may shout, be realistic, but purpose whispers, be relentless. You weren't born to survive. You were born to dominate. You weren't sent here to blend in. You were sent to break cycles, shift atmospheres, and redefine legacy. You carry within you a fire that hell cannot extinguish and doubt cannot bury. And if you dare to believe that God is truly handling it all, then start acting like it. Speak like it's already yours. Think like you're already there. Move like the weight has already lifted. Because when you move in faith, heaven moves with you. When you walk in purpose, doors that were locked for years will swing open like they were waiting on your knock. When you show up knowing the end is settled, you don't beg, you command. You don't shrink, you rise. You don't run from battles, you win them before they even start, because you know who fights for you. You don't need another sign. You are the sign. You are the evidence that something greater is at work in your life. If you had any idea how many times God saved you in silence, how many times He rerouted your pain, how many times He allowed the delay just to protect the promise, you would stop complaining and start praising. You would stop overthinking and start overcoming. Because the miracle isn't coming. The miracle is already in motion. Let the storms come. Let the critics talk. Let the delays happen. You're not moved by what you see. You're anchored by what you know. And what you know is this: He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are positioned. Every closed door is a redirection. Every tear is watering your future. Every trial is evidence that something massive is about to break open. The bigger the pressure, the greater the release. So stop overthinking, stop doubting, and stop questioning what's already finished. Your story was written in victory ink. Your chapter doesn't end in defeat. It ends in dominion, because the author of your life writes flawlessly. He never lifts his pen in confusion. He never edits his plans based on your emotions. He already handled it. He already made a way. He already cleared the path. And now it's your turn to walk like it's true. The only thing standing between you and your destiny is the story you keep telling yourself about why you can't have it. Rewrite the narrative. Flip the script. Shift the atmosphere. Don't just dream it. Declare it. Don't just hope it. Walk like it. Because faith isn't waiting on what happens. It becomes what happens. And when you know the fight is already finished, all that's left to do is win like you were born to.